When I was 14, I went on an overseas trip to China with my classmates. And at that time, I despised taking photos. Maybe it's because I have shaky hands, but it's more likely because of the fact that I hated it when I looked at these photos in the future. I would remember the embarrassing times of the trip, like the time where I locked myself and my roommate outside the hotel room because we both left the entry card inside, or the time where I wanted to borrow a game console charger from my friend and I knocked on the wrong hotel door, only to realize that I may or may not have interrupted a couple's evening, or the time where me and my classmate got lost in a museum because we wandered off from the class and decided to be Dora the Explorer. The thing is, these photos are a reminder of the memories in the past, the stories that have unfolded, or used to share ideas that transcend what words can comprehend. After all, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And it is the same when we take notes. The notes serve as a storage of information for future reference. But there's one difference. Notes are also supposed to induce various levels of deeper processing and knowledge encoding. We are often told to write copious amounts of notes during lesson time, and it pisses me off when we are praised for being good human transcribers, but frowned upon when we actually use our brain cells before writing stuff down. To see why this is an absurd way of writing notes, let's try to visualize the processes that help turn sensory information, which is the lectures, and the content that you consume, to be encoded into long-term memory. Step 1. You take in and comprehend the lecture material. Step 2. You identify the key points. Step 3. You try to link the material to prior knowledge and prior notes. Step 4. You paraphrase, summarize, and try to represent the information in a different way, such as using visuals, analogies. And that is how you get written notes to help facilitate the processing of information, instead of just dumping it there because your brain can't take it. Now, let's look at the process when you decide to turn off your brain and just spam whatever the teacher says verbatim. Step 1. You take in the lecture material. Step 2. You write it down. And step 3. You forget the content and start reanalyzing your life choices. So how do you prevent yourself from falling into this rabbit hole of useless notes? Firstly, we want to engage our brain more by writing the notes freehand instead of typing it. Typing notes makes it faster and easier to write word for word, which is exactly the way to speedrun not learning anything. Using freehand also allows you to use spatial arrangement and arrows to represent certain concepts that link to one another. Secondly, we want to spend time thinking before we write anything down. So listen to a section of the lecture. Stop, think, then write. This way, you are forcing yourself to actually process the information instead of being that human transcriber. Thirdly, we want to represent the notes in a way that makes the most sense to us. Imagine yourself revising your notes and opening up your notebook, only to see paragraph after paragraph of words. I'm sure it will be easier to understand rocket science than your notes. And when we cannot understand our own notes, what do we all do? Just spam and memorize, regurgitate information, and then we forget about it. Having notes that make sense actually saves you time in revision. Imagine your new notes where you represent the information in a mini mind map where there are visuals representing certain chunks of words, and you can just glance through in a second and get a good idea of what the notes are talking about. Maybe put in certain analogies to represent specific processes to remind you of how the process actually works. Basically, you're trying to simplify the information so you make your life simpler in the long run. And I know you are probably still very paranoid and want to write down everything the teacher says, word for word. If that's the case, just do collecting and processing instead. Whenever you know you're going to be writing notes, split your page into half. Then the left column will be collecting, which is basically the notes you have been writing so far, word for word, maybe some bullet points, etc. The right column will be processing. Processing is essentially everything I've mentioned, which is using visuals, analogies, paraphrasing, summarizing, using a mini mind map, yada yada, everything. All these things will help you feel a strain in the brain, which seems like a bad thing, right? But this is desirable difficulty, or also known as cognitive load. And it is your brain trying to actively frame the information in a way that best suits your understanding. And that is where the learning takes place.